Hello everybody and welcome to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. My name is Irene and today we're going to be talking about the biggest ability changes in Wild Rift when compared to the PC version of League of Legends. It's understandable that some abilities need to be updated to fit a mobile touchscreen control layout, but some of these could actually have just remained the same. Regardless, almost all of these changes heavily impact the champion and what they're able to do in the game. So don't be surprised if you see any of these things happen and wonder, what the heck is going on? Don't say that we didn't warn you. But before we get into the video though, I want to mention that we're doing a ton of giveaways. Just subscribe to the channel and join our Discord with the link in the description, and head to the giveaways channel for further instructions. It's really simple, and you stand a pretty good chance of winning one of the many different prizes. And finally, our question of the day. What champion's ability would you change from the PC version to Wild Rift, and how? I think I'd have to change Fiddlestick's passive. The amount of vision control in Wild Rift is definitely lower, and Fiddlestick's passive is fun and all, but can still cause a lot of havoc and confusion in a really fast-paced game. Leave your answers in the comments below. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the biggest ability changes in the Wild Rift. First up, it's Annie's first ability, Disintegrate. This ability in the PC version of League is a point-and-click ability that cannot be cast without an enemy to click on, and it only damages a single target. But in the mobile version, it's been adjusted quite a bit. They took away the strength of having it be a point-and-click ability that locks onto its target, and now it's a skill shot that when it makes contact with an enemy, explodes in a small area, and it can be cast without an enemy to click on. This is actually a huge shift for Annie players. Annie is normally a really annoying mage that just points and clicks on you over and over again to whittle you down in mid lane, and uses Disintegrate to last hit every now and then, with the cooldown being rather quick when it kills a unit. Now, it's a massive wave clear tool that you can use on top of your Incinerate ability to decimate waves and teamfights. It gives you another way to stun multiple people, but most importantly, it gives you a way to charge up your passive Pyromania stun without having to rely on using your second and third abilities, which are more important cooldowns than your Disintegrate. Also, you can use it for checking brush. This one change to Annie's primary ability makes her remain a difficult champion to deal with, but with much less frustration on the poke side of things. Next, let's talk about another ability that normally requires a target to use. But this time, we're not talking about needing an enemy target. Lee Sin's Safeguard used to require a friendly unit, a ward, minion, or champion. Now, it is a free targeted dash. You can use it anywhere, at any time. The first time I saw this, I actually freaked out and had no idea what was going on. It makes a lot of sense that this ability is free targeted on the mobile version, since pulling off insect kicks would be much harder given the controls. But honestly, this makes Lee Sin even that much safer. In the PC version, he has to rely on allies or use his ward in order to hop away when jumped on. Now, he can invade or get away from invades without having to rely on others or spend a valuable resource like a ward to do so. Overall, this makes Lee Sin that much harder to play against and that much easier to pilot. This is the change that I'm sure if they made it to the PC version, a lot of people would dislike it, including Lee Sin players themselves. Let's throw out some small changes to a few ultimates and then move on from there. Ashe's ultimate can be controlled and you can steer it around mid-cast so it can find a target and hit them. Honestly, a massive change to Ashe and a really interesting and fun way to change the champion up for a mobile release. And a little side note, Aurelion Sol's third ability, Comet of Legend, can now be steered just like Ashe's ultimate, making it much easier to use and honestly a bit scary to play against. I think these changes may take a small skill element out of the game, but add a completely different minigame into the mix. Another ultimate that's been slightly changed is Lux's ultimate. It's now global and spreads across the entire map. Garen's third ability, Judgment, critically strikes those who are on the edge of it, and he also has a little bit of extra oomph onto his ultimate as well, making it do area of effect damage to all those around his target. It definitely feels like Riot got the idea that Garen is a bit too single target focused and needed more team fighting power. And this definitely does the trick without overdoing it. Next, let's talk about 3 champions that got changes to passive abilities. Both Vayne and Twisted Fate have abilities that you can't press in the PC version. Twisted Fate's E, Stacked Deck, and Vayne's W, Silver Bolts. But in the mobile version, these abilities both can be activated to increase the attack speed of these champions for a short time, with a little added effect as well. Vayne will heal for some of the Silver Bolt damage that she deals during the increased attack speed, and Twisted Fate will actually roll his loaded dice passive every every single time he auto-attacks an enemy champion, which means free gold. Even just walking up with this ability and trading for a few auto-attacks can yield some good results in the income department. Sure, you can turn autos into gold, but just don't be too greedy with it or your enemy is going to turn you into gold. And the third champion that got a change to a passive ability is Vi. Her W in the PC version of League of Legends can't be pressed and is just a passive that after 3 attacks does extra damage and grants her additional attack speed. This has been moved to being Vi's passive in the mobile version, and her second ability has been changed to her Blast Shield. She can activate it at any time, but if she attacks an enemy, she begins to gain stacks. If she activates the ability at 5 stacks, which is the maximum, she gains a burst of movement speed. This is incredibly helpful for a champion that needs to stick to her enemies or even have a reliable way to get out of a fight. The fact that she needs to get it to 5 stacks though before she gains a burst of movement speed does mean that she has to commit herself to the fight before she gets the full benefit of the shield and its abilities. Miss Fortune's first ability, Double Up, is now a skill shot instead of a point and click. There seems to be a bit of a theme around abilities that are too reliable in lane for poking out your enemies, and they have been changed. Instead of reducing the damage they deal, they just decided to do away with the consistency that the abilities have, making them much harder to land on your opponent. And here's another change to a champion that makes them a little harder to pilot, and that change is to Fizz. This guy is a headache to deal with in the PC version of League of Legends, and he's thankfully toned down a bit in Wild Rift. Riot took out an ability that covers one of his early weaknesses. In the PC version, Fizz's passive is Nimble Fighter, which allows him to move through units and ignore unit collision. And he takes a flat amount of reduced damage from all sources. This allows him to be much safer against ranged matchups in mid lane and not take as much damage, and also not suffer as much damage when trying to run away since he won't have to path around minions while escaping. But in Wild Rift, the W Fizz normally has is split between his passive and his second ability. Fizz's passive becomes Seastone Trident, which makes it so his attacks deal additional damage over time, and his second ability is replaced with Rending Wave. It behaves very similarly to how his Seastone Trident W active does in the PC version, but with the biggest change being that its cooldown is much longer, and it relies on your last hitting with it to reduce the cooldown. In Wild Rift, Rending Wave empowers Fizz's next attack to deal bonus damage, and if you kill a unit, it resets Rending Wave's cooldown to 1 second. This small shift means that Fizz's fighting power is substantially lower. He takes more damage at all stages of the game, and actually deals a slight bit more when he first maxes his third and second abilities, which have much more damage per rank than the PC version. So Fizz's early game is weaker, but he will once again be rewarded with an incredibly powerful mid-game power spike if you survive. Just watch out for that slightly lower cooldown on his second ability. It'll be harder to get multiples of them off in a team fight if you're used to how it is in the PC version. Now let's talk about a champion that got a few tweaks to his kit overall, and that's Wukong. Wukong now has a passive that doesn't stack up on him, but on his opponents, dealing additional damage with each stack. His first ability now has a small heal on it as well to give him a little bit of sustain in lane, and his third ability rewards him when he finds isolated targets, by having both of the clones that jump out of the ability provide extra damage on his main target. All of these changes push Wukong towards being a duelist and bruiser, who wants to stay in the fight for a long time to stack up his passive. It's definitely a more visceral passive as opposed to defensive stats stacking up like in the PC version. This makes you feel like keeping the assault up on your opponent is worth it. Now let's talk about probably the biggest change to any champion, and that's Shyvana. Shyvana has always been a thorn in Riot's side. She doesn't really fulfill the fantasy of being a big dragon, or a half dragon, or even a dragon slayer. And when she does start doing well, it's this full ability power flame breath cannon build that has a really annoying play pattern where she just pokes all day. I'm not sure why they decided to make the changes they did to her in Wild Rift, but here they are. Her passive gives her more damage to elemental drakes, and makes it so that when she kills a drake, her abilities in her dragon form become empowered, depending on which drakes that she's killed. For her twin bite, if she's killed a mountain drake, the ability will now slow enemies by 60% while in dragon form. For her burnout, if she has killed a cloud drake, her burnout hastes her by an additional 25% while in dragon form. For her flame breath, if she's killed an infernal drake, it converts the damage dealt to scorched enemies into true damage while in dragon form. And lastly, for her Dragon's Descent ability, if she's slain an ocean drake, she gains an additional 150 health while in dragon form. I'm not sure why Riot feels the need to tie Shyvana to the dragons so heavily every single time they need to change her, but for some reason they keep trying. I'm glad they did give her some kind of slow in her kit though, but having it be dependent on killing a mountain drake and having her ultimate on makes it really unreliable. These aren't all the changes to champions, but these are some of the biggest ones that you definitely need to know about. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and don't forget to answer our question of the day in the comments below. We really do love hearing from you guys, and on that note, it's time to go read some of your comments. I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay safe and have fun.